8 former drivers have filed racial discrimination complaints against Amazon.com. The Black and Latino employees were fired by companies that Amazon used for making deliveries. They say the firing was triggered by Amazon's policy on background checks. The drivers are being represented by the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice. Joining us is our guest from the committee is the litigation director, Oren Sellstrom. Thank you very much for being with us, Oren.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me a bit about the drivers, because some of them, it seems, they had been working and making these deliveries for quite a while.
They had. That's what's so compelling about this case. They had been working for months on the job, doing a good job, no performance issues, and yet one day out of the blue were called in, told Amazon is tightening its requirements, and they were summarily laid off without explanation.
And as far as what there is in the records of these drivers, I know we're not going to name names here, but I guess there might have been something in those records that would raise a question, maybe.
I don't think it would even raise a question, really. I mean, there are incidents that some of these folks had that were old or minor, but certainly nothing that would disqualify them from being delivery drivers. In fact, as I said, they were already doing the job. And so Amazon's reasons for firing them are very unclear and we think illegal.
What makes it illegal exactly?
Well, it goes back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which said that employers can't discriminate on the basis of race. What that law does is not only outlaw intentional discrimination. If someone says, I don't want to hire you because you're Black or Latino, that's clearly illegal. But what Title VII also says is even if a policy has a disproportionate impact on minority employees, that can be illegal as well if the employer cannot justify it. And that's exactly what the case is here.
Well, I imagine, of course, it also amounts to what you do with a policy as far as what kinds of history are considered bad enough to raise the flag. So what if a company just wants to be really stringent? I mean, if someone just gets stopped for speeding within the last 5 years and they say, no, they can't work for us.
Well, what the federal employment agency that oversees this kind of claim, the EEOC, has said, it's really cautioned employers not to use a kind of blanket background check that sets these kind of bright lines, but rather to look at individuals as individuals. And particularly if background check policies have a disproportionate impact on Black and Latino workers, as many often do, then there has to be some business justification, some very close tie between what the actual job is and what the person's background is, and to really treat individuals as individuals and make the determination on that ground. And that's where Amazon really fell down in this case.
And talk about some of the other hazards of relying on records, because there are things that might make an employer, a potential employer, nervous, but it might mean that behind that one thing, there is no conviction necessarily, and maybe there could even be, I guess, some mixed up information.
Absolutely. These records, these background checks are often fraught with misinformation. And so it's really a false sense of security that employers get if they are relying solely on background checks. Certainly that could be one tool. We're not disputing that employers may in some instances want to run background checks, but the issue is this kind of blanket policy that Amazon had that really ended up terminating hardworking individuals that were already on the job, doing a great job, and were summarily terminated. That's wrong, and it's illegal.
We're talking with Oren Sellstrom from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice. Talk about Amazon's justification for this, because they say they're looking out for the safety of the general public. So obviously what they're trying to tell us is that we don't want any drivers who either might harm somebody or might be a problem behind the wheel, maybe have a substance abuse issue or something. I mean, isn't there something well, don't they have to watch out for something like that?
I think what you really have here, Chris, is an internet giant that is not really paying attention to what's going on the ground. They're well known for their algorithms and logistics and moving lots of packages all across the country to all sorts of different addresses. But in this case, I think what they really have lost sight of is that it's human beings that are actually doing the work on the ground. Folks that in this case were actually doing the job well, performing well, and that was not taken into consideration. The terminology that they used to terminate these workers was deactivated. That's what the workers were told. That tells us that what Amazon is doing is viewing these workers not as individuals, but as cogs in a machine. And that's not right, and that's what we've objected to and is illegal under the law.
Anything you've been able to find out what it's been like for these workers since they were deactivated? Because now they have this employment history that they might be asked about if they're looking for another job.
Absolutely. It's been really horrible and painful for many of these drivers. Some of the drivers actually left other employment in order to go to Amazon to be delivery drivers after having submitted to a background check and told, you're fine, come on the job. And so they left other employment in order to go to what was a better paying job at Amazon. Now, as you say, they've been terminated. That's difficult in and of itself to have to explain to a future employer. Some are still unemployed. Others have gotten other jobs that are not as well paying. And more than that, I think there's the sense that they have not been treated with respect, that you want of any employer, that you're doing a good job for your employer. You deserve better than that to just be terminated on the spot for no good reason.
What do you hope to achieve with these complaints to the MCAD?
Well, we'd like to see Amazon change its policy, first of all. It looks to us like this was a nationwide policy. And so we think that this affected many, many drivers all across the country. We'd like to see Amazon change that and to really look at individuals as individuals, do the kind of individualized review that the EEOC recommends, and treat people with respect in that regard.
Of course, I think this also has implications for maybe even setting a norm in the Boston area, because we have a lot of people who maybe have no criminal history, or maybe they do have a criminal history, and they turn their lives around and they're trying to do well. Doesn't this affect those norms as well, a case like this?
Absolutely. I mean, that's really the broader issue and why it's so important to us at the Lawyers Committee. We have a problem in this country with over-incarceration, particularly of communities of color, over-policing in communities of color, and so what you end up with is large segments of the population that have some contact with the criminal justice system. All of us want and benefit from making sure that those individuals, when they come out of jail or prison, re-enter society, get good jobs, have equal opportunity at jobs and housing and so forth. And so this is definitely a piece of that puzzle in making sure that all of us live in the kind of society we want to live in, where there's equal opportunity.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.